Welcome to Democracy-ish. I'm Danielle Moodie.
And I'm Wajahat, an undecided voter in the Rust Belt.
Then you are very important, Wash. You are literally the most important person and mythical figure in America right now.
I was waiting for Liz Cheney and Leon Panetta to endorse Kamala Harris, but it seems like they have, so here I am.
I mean, so it's wild. We're in a wild place today. I believe we are 31 days away from the election. Next week, folks, it is less than a month until the and I'll say this because I've been saying it on the Danielle Moodie show that I'm reframing. It is 31 days until the election is over because people have already started voting, mail-in voting, absentee voting, and early voting. So we have 31 days until the election is actually over. But today, right, we're going to get to some Trumpist stuff. Hi, Debbie. We're going to get to some Trumpist stuff that has happened in this sphere. But I think that it's important today to talk about Waj. It's nearly a year since the October 7th attack in Israel. It's been nearly a year, and tens of thousands of Palestinians have been killed, have been murdered. Over 1,000 Israelis have been killed. Now, over 2,000 Lebanese people have been killed. And most recently, Ta-Nehisi Coates has a new book that is out, and it is called The Message. And it is basically his account of his visits to the region, to Israel and Palestine. He's making the rounds on the news. I want you to set up the first clip that we are going to play, Waj, when he goes on CBS in the morning to do his book junket, as all authors do, as you did. Set up this first clip of Tony and his question before we play it.
I just got the book yesterday. I've read half of it. Nothing too incendiary. If you've been to Gaza, we'll talk about it. What he describes is things that you and I have talked about on this show, things that scholars have written about. And he writes as a witness, as a black man, and makes the comparisons to what he has experienced and his ancestors have experienced. So he goes to CBS Morning. For those who don't know, the fluffiest softballs in the media landscape come from morning shows. Why? People are getting up, they're having their coffee, they're getting their kids ready. People oftentimes don't want incendiary rhetoric. They want controversial topics. Even, I don't know if there was a comet coming. They want it with like some nice lightness to it. We might die in 2 days, but look at the weather.
Okay. Right.
So
don't look up.
Dale, you got Nate Burleson, you got Tony. Tony's interviewed me before. He's in this mold. Ta-Nehisi's there. Ta-Nehisi Coates might be, let's say, arguably the number one public intellectual of our lifetime, right? He comes there to talk about his book. It's a morning show. Starts off nice. Nate Burleson gives him a softball. And then Tony hijacks the rest of the 7-minute segment, starting with this.
Okay. Oh, no.
That section would not be out of place in the backpack of an extremist. And so then I found myself wondering, why does Ta-Nehisi Coates, who I've known for a long time, read his work for a long time, very talented, smart guy, leave out so much? Why leave out that Israel is surrounded by countries that want to eliminate it? Why leave out that Israel deals with terror groups that want to eliminate it? Why not detail anything of the first and the second intifada, the cafe bombings, the bus bombings, the little kids blown to bits? And is it because you just don't believe that Israel in any condition has a right to exist?
If the first question, which there was a small technical glitch, if you didn't hear it, Tony starts off by saying, yeah, I read your book, and it seems like it would be in the backpack of an extremist.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
And then I read the book. Folks, I read it yesterday. I'm looking at it. I'm like, what does he say that is in any way, shape, or form extreme. And then he starts off the chapter on Gaza by actually recounting his trip to the Holocaust Memorial in Israel, and talking about trauma and victimhood, and specifically a really powerful point of, being oppressed won't save you.
Thank
and
you, Mary.
Victim won't save you from perpetrating that on others. And as a Black man, that's his main concern as Black people.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, as people have been suffering for 400 years of oppression, he worries about the collective soul and consciousness of Black people. Like, oh, we've suffered so much. Are we then damned or cursed to, God forbid, if we get power, to then be blind to the suffering of other people, such as Palestinians in Gaza, and revisit this cruelty on others? Danielle, take it away.
I just, one of the things that I want to put up is what Ta-Nehisi replies, right, in this exchange, because folks, if you need to watch the full 6 minutes, because I was astounded that these types of questions would be asked. But this is what his response was to Tony's initial question. No country in this world establishes its ability to exist through rights. Countries establish their abilities to exist through force, as America did. Israel does exist. It's a fact. The question of its right is not a question I would be faced with any other country. And I think that is important to say, because here is where I feel like things go off the rails, where you want to be backed into a corner. You want to back people into a corner as to try and say that by questioning the ferocity, the devastation of this war and its intentions, if in fact it's right? Not that this country should exist. It does. So the fact is that if we get into these equivocations of should it not, then we're actually not dealing with the issue at hand. Because now it's similarly, and I say this when folks say, when we start battling about Black people's humanity, right? Like, if I'm having to defend my humanity to you, then we're not even getting into the conversation around systemic violence, state-sanctioned violence, etc. And that's where I feel like this Tony was like, he did not read this book and you tell me, Waj, he did not read this book with the intention of opening up a conversation. He read the book, or maybe he didn't even read the book. I'll say that maybe he read the book, but it was with the intention to refute and to dispel all of the things that Coates was offering.
Yeah, well, let me be even more blunt, and we always promise to keep it blunt, and I'm going to keep it super blunt. I'm a brown-skinned Muslim man. I'm the son of Pakistani Muslim immigrants. I've been talking about this issue for 20 years. When you're a brown-skinned person, Palestinian, Arab, or Muslim, within the media landscape, you are not given permission to be seen as objective, rational, lucid. You're seen as hysterical, sensitive, biased. I have been asked for the past year, despite my... Go look it up, folks. I think I'm pretty moderate, and I think I'm very intellectually and morally consistent on these issues, calling out terrorism. You know how many times I've been asked to preemptively and proactively condemn Hamas and Hezbollah, Danielle? Nearly every single time. I'm not a member of Hamas, folks. I'm not a member of Hezbollah. I was born and raised in the Bay Area. I drive a minivan. But because I'm Muslim, and by extension Arabs or Palestinians, we have to, if you will, defend the humanity of our people. We have to proactively condemn violent acts done by violent people. And oftentimes, when we come on these shows, we get prosecuted. We're not treated with equal deference. And so I think it was really telling for a lot of people and a lot of Americans, a lot of folks were like, Ta-Nehisi Coates got the same treatment. Oh, these Muslims, these Palestinians, these Arabs, what they've been talking about, I see it. Because here's Ta-Nehisi Coates comes in and he has to defend his thesis, his life, his book, the fact that he's not an anti-Semite. And Tony, what was not disclosed, has an ex-wife living in Israel. He has 2 kids living in Israel. He had converted to Judaism for ex-wife. And then he came on as a prosecutor. And Gayle King and Nate Burleson, the other 2 co-hosts, said there quiet, not a word.
Nothing. Yeah.
I mean, you should all see the whole 6-minute clip. It's wild.
let's play this other piece where Coates is talking about ethnocracy. Let's play this and we'll talk about it.
Laid down their citizenship rights based on ethnicity. The country of Israel is a state in which half the population exists on one tier of citizenship, and everybody else that's ruled by Israelis exists on another tier, including Palestinian Israeli citizens. The only people that exist on that first tier are Israeli Jews. Why do we support that? Why is that okay?
What I think is super important here, and I want to show this real quick, which is, folks, as a Black person, I too visited Israel and Palestine. And for those of you who are new to democracy-ish, but are here in this space with us, I visited Israel and Palestine back in 2015. And it was a trip that I went on with the Foundation for Middle East Peace. We visited and spoke with members of the Knesset. We spoke with Palestinian activists. We spoke with Jewish activists. And it was a week long that I was there. I came back with mild PTSD, and I wrote about it for NBC BLK. I wrote about it because I had never experienced Jim Crow in real life. I'd only read about apartheid South Africa, about Jim Crow and segregation. I'd never experienced it. And the amount of fear and grief that I experienced while I was there sits with me to this day.
And you like Ta-Nehisi went to Hebron, right?
Yes. Okay. Yes.
You went to the West Bank.
Yeah. I went to the West Bank, and I saw the roads that Palestinians are allowed to drive on versus the roads that Israeli citizens are allowed to drive on. I saw the checkpoints, right? The militarized checkpoints, right? I was flanked by Israeli officers as I was in the West Bank. I had guns pointed at me as a Black person and asking me, what am I doing here? And that questioning began at the airport when I walked out of the gate, right? And so for him, for Ta-Nehisi in this book, what he is doing is putting a lens on his experience as a child of Jim Crow, going to an apartheid state, right? And recognizing the deep parallels that we don't investigate, because every time that we bring this up, you're sidetracked with questions about whether or not you are an anti-Semite. Right. Because I'm questioning an apartheid state, a state that does not seem just. And to me, that's where we always begin to lose the conversation rather than have an opportunity for us to engage on what is acceptable in the world, right? What does it mean to be a humanist, right? And to put all people's humanity forward.
And, Ta-Nehisi Coates' question was unanswered. Why do we support this? Because the United States supports this with arms, with money, with diplomatic support. And, we're recording this a few days before the 1-year anniversary, if you will, the 1-year commemoration of the terrorist attacks in Israel done by Hamas, where over 1,200 Israelis were killed. But in the past year, Danielle, over 43,000 Palestinians have been killed by Israel. Just today, Israel, for the first time, struck West Bank, killed 18 people. It's the first time in 20 years. It's attacking Syria. Thousands of people have been killed in Lebanon. The war has expanded. And I know people don't like hearing this, but we always keep it honest here. I always say President Biden has been one of the most effective presidents of my lifetime. He has evolved and changed on so much. In 4 years, he's done amazing things domestically. His one weak spot, his blind spot, is this zealous ideological commitment to Israel and him bringing back like Golda Meir from the early 1970s. And more reporting has come out this week that Joe Biden openly knows that Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, wants to sabotage right? The election chances of Kamala Harris. He will not abide by any red lines. Like, this is open, folks. Like, the U.S. government knows this. Biden knows this, that he is a hostile party. They openly want Donald Trump to win. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, when you know all of this, when you've seen all this destruction, all this chaos, when you've seen Netanyahu cross every red line, why, oh why, are we helping Netanyahu, who wants Trump to win, in the final 3 weeks of the election and harming Kamala Harris? And then you have Ta-Nehisi Coates using his massive equity, coming out and asking these questions. Support this. Is this moral? Are we for apartheid? Can Israel do better? And then you see Tony, instead of engaging the conversation, attacks him. And I don't know if we have that tweet. Then Barry Weiss on
Oh, yes. Let me pull it up.
Gets Coleman Hughes, who's a young Black conservative intellectual. And I've been warning about this. I called it a couple of months ago. I said, this is the guy they're going to bring out. Coleman Hughes is a young Black American intellectual. He's a fellow at the Manhattan Institute. Go check out the Manhattan Institute, folks. Very conservative. And then Barry Weiss runs the Free Press. And this is what Coleman Hughes says. Coates is not a journalist so much as a composer, one who uses words not to convey the truth, much less to point a constructive path forward, but to create a mood, the same way that a film scorer uses notes. And the specter haunting this book, indeed all of his work, is the crudest version of identity politics, in which everything are reduced to a childlike story in which the victims can do no wrong and the villains can do no right. Danielle.
I mean, it is. I saw this tweet and I thought, first of all, for anyone to refer to Coates's work as the crudest version of identity politics, to me, you are clearly not reading or comprehending what it is that he is putting out, which is an esteemed and intellectual critique on America, right? Which is what Baldwin, Lord, others have done throughout our history. Like, you have a particular lens. Us, as me, as a Black woman, as a queer woman, child of immigrants, has a particular lens of critique to put on America. Waj, you, right, as a son of Pakistani immigrants, right, a father, right, a writer, have a particular lens and critique. And what always seems to be devalued is the fact that because we are not considered the quote unquote norm, that any articulation of our critique of America or our critique of America as it pertains to our standing in the world is somehow crude and should be dismissed. And that is basically what Tony offered on CBS.
That's it.
And said, oh, well, like, why should we even be listening to you? This is a book that belongs in the backpack of an extremist. He called him a terrorist on national television for saying to people, we should think about what it means to wipe 40,000 plus people off of a map and not think twice about it. We should think about why we don't have and offer in mainstream corporate media the same type of empathy that we were calling on for the Ukrainian people who were forced off of their land by the war, then not have that same compassion for people that live in, my God, I don't even know what the mileage is of Gaza, but let me tell you, like, it ain't that fucking much land.
Nope.
Right?
Open air prison.
Why we are devoid of compassion when we are there, when we are looking at Muslims and brown people, why it is acceptable for us to say that 40,000 people are no longer on this earth and it was not a natural disaster that caused their demise, right?
Why their lives don't matter. Does that sound familiar, folks? Why do some lives matter and other lives not matter? Why do we care about Ukrainians, as we should, who are facing an invasion and occupation, but we don't have the same type of empathy towards Syrian refugees or Palestinians who have been occupied for decades? Where is the empathy? Where is the story? Who are the storytellers? And Ta-Nehisi Coates, as a Black man using his equity, he doesn't have to do this, folks. He literally is using his equity that he's built up over the past 10 years to put a spotlight on Palestinians and say, hey, maybe they should be the narrators of their own story. And this is happening during a time, like I said before, we're nearing a 1-year, quote unquote, anniversary if there is a better word for it, I don't know, of this disastrous war that has now expanded to the West Bank as of today, Lebanon as of last week, Syria is being bombed. And I'm the son of Pakistani Muslim immigrants, but I also cut my teeth in politics as a 21-year-old UC Berkeley student protesting the war on terror. I can tell you as an old man with gray hairs, folks, every single thing that Ta-Nehisi has been through, we've been through for the past 24 years. Every single thing. That whole exchange, I mean, I have tough skin, but I guess it would be traumatizing because that's been my entire career, folks. No matter what I say, no matter what I do, no matter where I go, I get treated just like that, Danielle. And I was on the right side of history, much like you, Danielle. We knew the war on terror would be disastrous. America has like the memory span of gnats, but you would think that maybe, just maybe, people might remember the disaster. But here was the first question. The first question at the VP debate on Tuesday. Can we play the first question, please?
Oh, yes. Hold 1 second. Yes.
Walls, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran?
What? I mean, and I sat there and I listened to that, Danny. I'm like, what? Or did the CBS even hear what they're saying? Preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? That would be like World War III. And they just so casually said it, and it was like a litmus test. You better say yes, Waltz. You better say yes, JD Vance. Who's going to compete with each other by saying yes, yes, yes? I don't know. I was horrified by that. You?
I mean, the casualness with which they offered that question is what got me, right? Like the casualness with, so you support World War III, correct? Right? Like you're down with that. You're down.
Daniel, even worse, it was like, you better. You better.
And it's a preemptive strike. So it's not, oh, Israel has a right to defend itself. It's like you have now escalated to the point where Israel has a right to attack. Right? And so it is, again, who has the right to defend themselves? Right? Because in America, still to this day, post Jim Crow, do Black people have the right to defend themselves? Do Black people have the right to be armed? Right? Because I can rattle off,
Ahmaud Arbery, he was running in Georgia, got lynched.
Right. John Crawford, who was going to buy a gun in Walmart, who was shot dead in Walmart several years ago. Right? You can talk about these people who had guns, who were Black and had the registration, had the license, but they were killed. So again, when we are talking about the right to do X, Y, and Z, who are we talking about? And so I want to put up the side-by-side slides, Waj, of Brett Stevens, New York Times, who never ceases to fucking amaze me.
Always the wrong take.
So here's Brett Stevens. 20 years on, I don't regret supporting the war in Iraq. You know, the war that we entered into based on a lie of weapons of mass destruction, right? This was Bush's war that everyone, by the way, regrets having gone into, but not Brett Stevens.
Nope. And this was 20 years on after the devastation.
Correct. And so what does he say most recently?
This week, look at the date, folks, October 1st. When I used to write for the New York Times as a contributing op-ed writer, I'll spill some tea. We used to sit there, and this was, a lot of people think it's just the Muslims and Arabs and Black folks. No, Jewish writers, white writers. We used to sit there and go like, we're convinced that Brett Stevens and Barry Weiss at the time was at the New York Times. We were convinced they knew where bodies were buried because we had no idea why the New York Times would allow their prestigious, august name to be ruined and sullied by people like Brett Stevens and Barry Weiss, who are literally on the wrong side of history each and every single time, and inserted themselves in a national news where they became the butt of the jokes. And here's Brett Stevens, and there was another, I think for lack of space, if someone else did a bunch of screenshots of his articles. Anytime Brett Stevens needs an excuse to bomb Arabs and brown people and Muslims, he will write an article, folks. And so this thirst to like bomb Iran, right? This type of zealous mindset to defend Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel by any means necessary. I think we're at an inflection point. And I think Ta-Nehisi Coates, Danielle, is doing something that I haven't seen in my lifetime, where he's using his capacity and equity as a public intellectual and as a Black man to center Palestinian voices and brown and Muslim voices, and by extension, very deliberately Black voices and Black lives, and saying these matter. And he's confronting the same establishment that has put garlands around him for the past 10 years. And when we see in real time, I think everything goes back full circle. When he disrupts the establishment narrative, establishment turns on him in a second. So what will they do to you and me, Danielle, if that's how they turn on Ta-Nehisi?
We will see. I want to throw up this slide as we just close out, because I want to get us to Tina Peters and to the current election before we run out of time. But here's a poll, folks, and this is where we are in terms of decisions being made about who is going to vote in this election, and who is important. And this is wild to me. 47% for Donald Trump from Arab Americans? Are we insane here? And 41% for Kamala Harris. So, Waj?
Yeah, I look, I know, I think at the end of the day, she'll get a majority of it. But let me explain to folks, if I can, and let me take a minute, because it's important. A lot of people are in pain. They're seeing what they call genocide for the past year. A majority of Democratic voters think what Israel is doing is genocide. I want to go through the numbers one more time. 43,000 Palestinians killed. More Palestinian kids have been killed by Israel in the past year than all the kids that have been killed in war zones combined over the past 2 years. Now you see thousands of people being displaced in Lebanon. Syria is being attacked. Yemen is being attacked. West Bank. Hamas and Hezbollah don't control the West Bank, folks. That got bombed. In Dearborn, Michigan, you have 3 times as many Lebanese Americans than Palestinian Americans. I can tell you that when Kamala Harris got on the ticket, there was some sort of relief and excitement. The bar is so low, folks, it's in hell. Everything coming back full circle. People just want to feel heard. They want to feel seen. They want people, their leaders, to show that at least we hear you and we care. Kamala Harris was able to be a bit empathetic, repeating the lines of President Biden. He has not been empathetic when it comes to Palestinians. I'm sorry, it's been a failure. The huge mistake, Danielle, I could tell you, I'm from these communities. The utter lack of even giving a Palestinian American the stage at the DNC. You had a Georgia Democratic delegate representative who submitted a 3-minute speech. Go see the speech. Mother Jones published it. Perfect. The fact that they refused to give a Palestinian a platform. And then this week, Danielle, with Lebanon being bombed, the fact that neither Kamala Harris or President Biden talked about the Lebanese civilians. So people are saying they don't care about us. I know Trump is terrible. I'll vote third party or I'm going to sit it out. And so people say, oh, you idiot Muslims and Arabs, don't you know what Trump is going to do? They're not stupid, folks. They know. But they're human beings are emotional. Voters are emotional. You're emotional. If they're seeing their people killed and their Democratic liberal leaders don't give a F, and liberal white folks oftentimes, let's be honest, on social media are mocking them, they're like, you know what? You all figure this out. I'm going to leave the top blank and vote downstream.
I mean, and this is, we're talking about a razor thin election, right? We're talking about, we will never see blowout elections again in this country until we get rid of the Electoral College. It is going to be a handful of people in a handful of Midwestern states that have the ability to decide whether or not we continue with the democratic project or whether or not we fall into a dictatorship. And I think that it is important to note that Tim Walz is going to Michigan to try and appeal to Muslim voters there, a large population of Muslim voters there. I don't know if it's too little too late, but what I will say is that on this issue that we are talking about in this region of the world, I have yet to see a Democrat or a Republican that is good on this issue. And by good, I mean recognizing and upholding the humanity of people in this region. Yeah. And so, but what I do know is that Donald Trump and his son-in-law, right, Jared Kushner, see Gaza as, quote, beachfront property.
Yep.
right? And that they want to, quote, level the place
right.
and turn it into what? A parking lot.
Yep.
So if the people of Palestine have any hope, right, of survival, Democrats are it.
Yeah.
And while it pains me, folks, to utter that sentiment here sitting safely in New York, that's where we are. That's the place that we find ourselves in this area, which is in between a rock and, you know, a hard place.
Between the Dome of the Rock and a hard place.
Right. And that's it. Right before we get out of here, though,
we got some good news.
We have some good news. We have some good news. And you all who tuned in yesterday for the Danielle Moodie show, I went through this good news.
I love it.
But I want to
so
leave
much.
it with you. Wash, set up the good news that we
Oh gosh.
that we
All
have.
right. So County Clerk Tina Peters, MAGA loyalist zealot who tried and failed to overthrow the 2020 election, which Joe Biden won. Folks, F around sometimes and find out. She got 9 years in prison. I think she's a senior citizen. She was unrepentant throughout. And if you have time, and I recommend this, just when you're walking today, spend 13 minutes and listen to the entire speech of the judge while he was sentencing her. It is a work of art. It was so beautiful, I drank chai twice after it. But here is a clip while he was sentencing her to 9 years in prison. Beautiful.
I'm convinced you would do it all over again if you could. You're as defiant as a defendant as this court has ever seen. You don't have those histories of drug and alcohol abuse. There's no lifetime of trauma, not even close to the type of mitigating circumstances I would see from many folks who sit in that chair. No, to the contrary, Ms. Peters, you are a privileged person. You are as privileged as they come. And you use that privilege to obtain power, a following, and fame. And to be sure, there's no doubt in my mind that it's exactly what you wanted, and it defies all sense of common sense to believe when you suggested to me a few moments ago that you didn't want this attention. No, you crave it, ma'am. And there is no one in this courtroom who would consider that to be anything other than the absolute truth.
Bye, Karen.
But to get to the point of what it is that you did here, it's my impression distinctly that you never took your job of clerking particularly seriously. You didn't complete the certification. One scandal after another followed you in your time as the clerk. And ultimately, it was a belief that the echo chamber in which you live couldn't be wrong, among other things, that led you to do what you did here. This thought process, unfortunately, seems to consume so many in our country, regardless of race, gender, political affiliation, or the like, that what it is we hear and think can't possibly be wrong. There are many things in my mind that are crystal clear about this case. You are no hero, you abused your position, and you're a charlatan who used and is still using your prior position in office to peddle a snake oil that's been proven to be junk time and time again.
I mean, peddling the snake oil, you better say that. You better say that.
Deb, yes. And Deb, thank you. We forgot to mention she wanted a magnetic mattress.
Oh, a magnetic mattress because she can't. No, she said she can't go to prison because she needs a magnetic mattress for her back because of accidents she has been in.
Well,
and what
maybe Trump will send her a Trump mattress.
Here is what I tweeted earlier today, Waj. I said, I wonder, these people who are these Trump loyalists, they really think that Donald Trump loves them. And the thing that I posted and said was, I wonder when the last time Giuliani heard from Trump. Since he's been disbarred. I wonder if Tina Peters will receive a condolence, my condolences, a card when she's in prison from Donald Trump, who loved having her at Mar-a-Lago and she loved being there. If he'll even remember her name or if he remembers it now. I doubt it.
Folks, we had to end on that good note, and it's a very good note. It's an important note. In addition to Jack Smith's 165-page motion, that was unsealed by the judge, district court judge. Having that piece of news is good. It shows that there at least is some accountability, some judges willing to do the work, uphold the law, as we have this corrupt Supreme Court. And we had to end on that positive note, as we discussed so much that is so painful. Folks, I have to be the son of immigrants and do something that is very painful for me.
Yes.
Please like and subscribe. I know it sounds silly, but liking and subscribing subscribing to Danielle's channel helps Danielle and this show. Danielle's channel is part of the Mary Trump Media. Liking this YouTube video helps the algorithm gods. Sharing this video, which will be published, I think, in 2 minutes, helps get the word out. We've gone live now. I think this is our 3rd or 4th show. I'm writing for the Left Hook Substack. Go and subscribe. It's all free. I'm a terrible capitalist. Other people have paid content. I made everything free. And then we're trying to get Danielle on the left on Substack as well. And we will be back here every week live. Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern.
Amazing. Folks, thank you so much for your amazing donations. Thank you for the conversations in the chat. We appreciate you guys so very much. And we're working very hard to build a community here where we can begin to build our multiracial democracy by having thoughtful and engaging conversations. So you showing up each and every week allows us to do that. And yes, as Waj says, like, subscribe, share with your friends, bring somebody next week on Friday with you. We appreciate you as always. Thank you for listening to Democracy-ish. I'm Danielle Moodie.
And I'm Wajahat.
And we will be back next week, dear friends, if in fact we have a country left. Inshallah.